ठीक है, ठीक. Do we have Balen sir? So we have all presenters in the hall. First, Yoshinori Kawamura, and second one KC Dimole, and third one Arvind Swami. Okay. So a very good afternoon to one and all present out here. It's an immense pleasure that we, Uttar Pradesh Public Works Department, hosting the 81st annual session of Indian Road Congress. Uttar Pradesh Public Works Department welcome you all for the 12th technical session, and the topic which we will be discussing in these sessions are: first one, guidelines developed for resilient mountainous highway under previous GICA TC project, and second one is disaster and climate change resilient Arunachal experience and initiatives, and third one is considering climate changes issue in pavement design and construction. In this row, now may I welcome on the stage the chairman sir, MC Bansal sir, former Director General CPWD. He is the member of the Disaster Management Committee G5 of IRC and is involved in the formation of IRC codes, and his contribution to IRC is immense. And now I will invite a big round of applause for Chairman sir. And now I will invite Co-Chairman sir in this session, Colonel R.S. Bhanwala sir. He is the member secretary of Disaster Management Committee G5 of IRC. He is involved in the formation of IRC codes, and his contribution to IRC immense. And Colonel Bhanwala sir is an Arjuna awardee in rowing. A big round of applause for the Co-Chairman sir. The presenters for this session, technical session, are Mr. Yoshinori Kawamura. Please come on the stage, sir. Second one, Shri KC Dimole, sir. And third one, Dr. Arvind Swami, sir. A big round of applause for all the technocrats who will present their papers. Now may I please request Balen sir, Chief Engineer UVPWD Saharanpur, to please give bouquet to the chairman sir and the co-chairman sir as a gesture of welcome. A big round of applause for them. Now sir will give bouquet to co-chairman sir. To begin this technical session and to add the tech fragrance, may I please request the chairman sir to enlighten us with his knowledge and proceed this session from here. Up to you, sir.
Good afternoon, friends. Friends from industry, friends from the UP government, friends from academia. The topic selected for this session is very important in the present context. Our country is very vast. The geography runs from zero level, from sea to the mountains, 18,000, 20,000 feet and above. The temperature varies from 50 plus to sub-zero in the Himalayan region. Not a single solution can lead us to construct the infrastructure in such a vast variable geography of the country, having vast variable features. We need to develop guidelines, different guidelines, depending upon the different features and different climatic conditions. In the COP26, we have already committed the carbon footprint we have a National Disaster Management Plan 2016 and the National Green Policy 2015. We have to take care of all the government policies. At the same time, we have to think of reducing the carbon footprint for construction of roads. And besides this, we have also to see the economy of the country and economize the construction of the road. Today's topic is a burning topic, not only for our country, but for the globe as a whole, because reduction of carbon footprint is the main agenda of the UN, and we are signatory to the said agenda. Yesterday we had presented a document for disaster resilient construction of infrastructure in multi-hazard ecosystem, which has been accepted and approved by the Council. We have covered almost all the areas of the concern. The document will be published in the next midterm session. I am very happy to see that there are 3 authors here who have taken up this issue, which is close to my heart, and I hope the takeaway for the audience and the industry will be great from the today's session. With these words, I will not take much time. I will request the authors to take up their papers. Thank you. Namaskar. Now, first of all, I would call upon Mr. Yoshinori Kuwamura, team leader from O&M Expert JICA, to make presentation on guidelines developed for resilient mountainous highway under USJCK TC project. Thank you. Namaskar. Yoshinori.
Namaskar. Thank you for introducing me, Mr. Chairman. My name is Yoshinori Kawamura. I'm a team leader of the Technical Cooperation Project funded by JICA. I need to explain what JICA is. I don't think JICA is so popular in India. JICA stands for Japan International Cooperation Agency. That is the aiding body under Foreign Affairs of Japan. So JICA is doing many cooperation, international cooperation work here in India. So as a part of it, so now we are doing project for capacity development for maintenance of resilient mountainous highway with MORTH, Ministry of Road, Transport and Highway, and NHAI and NHIDCL to prepare handbooks for operation maintenance for resilient mountainous highways. That project is just started from April 2022, but we had another project, I mean the previous project, that started from 2016 to develop guidelines for development of mountainous highway in India. So I'd like to explain the guidelines prepared in the previous technical cooperation project. Next, please. The content is background of the project, abstract of the project, and developing guideline, sinking section, and groundwater variation analysis chart. I think groundwater variation analysis chart is very new to you. I think this method is very good for you to counteract sinking section of hill road. Next, please. Yes. This is the background of the previous JICA technical cooperation project. So at the beginning of the project, at that time in 2010, India already have a well-developed highway network. in the plain area. But Ministry of Road Transport and Highway aimed to facilitate highway development in mountainous region. The need for technical assistance for developing mountainous highway roads, especially in slope protection and mountain tunnel construction. Next, please. This is abstract of the previous project. Name is Capacity Development Project of Highways in Mountainous Region. Duration was 60 years. 6 years from April 2016. Actually, that was 1 year extended due to pandemic of COVID-19. And project was implemented by JICA and MORTH, Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, as a technical cooperation for development of mountainous highways. So in total, 17 JICA experts were involved along with Indian counterparts. And myself was team leader of this project as well. And we developed 5 guidelines for development of mountainous highways roads in India. And we also implemented model activities, including seminars, pilot project, in 3 hill road projects. Next, please. So these are the guidelines we developed with Indian counterpart. So after reviewing the existing guidelines, technical documents, and conditions surrounding development of mountainous highway in India, 5 guidelines were developed. After drafting, we had series of seminars, webinars to collect feedback from Indian side, and we submitted the guideline to MOS, and all 5 guidelines are approved by MOS on 31st January this year. Next, please. So to prepare guidelines, so JICA expert and Indian counterpart visited series of the hill road, as shown here. Next, please. We visited 19 locations 32 times, as shown in the map. Next, please. I'd like to give some summary of guidelines. So JICA guidelines include essential technology for development of resilient mountainous highway grown in the disaster-rich nation of Japan. Actually, we have earthquake, we have tsunami, we have avalanche, and we have volcano, many disasters we have. So our technology incorporates some sense of disaster resilient part. So first one was planning guideline, was aimed to improve existing guideline, and especially on alignment design as well as drainage facilities. And next is mountain tunnel guideline. Sorry, please go back. The second guideline is mountain tunnel guideline. This aims to introduce reinforcement works to counter fragile and complex geological structure in Himalayan region. And this guideline highlights the rock mass classification for tunnel support designed for NATO method, and also focuses on guidance on safety precaution and tunnel facilities, including lighting, ventilation, and electric system. The third is mountain bridge guidelines. This focuses on high pier bridges, multiple structures, and bamboo piles, which may be used for highway development. Next, please. The fourth is slope protection guidelines. This guideline aims to supplement the existing guidelines in India, focusing on slope failure and landslide issue along hill road, especially study and investigation for design of the countermeasures. This guideline highlighted countermeasures against the sinking section, especially for gravity deformation bedrock slope, which is considered one of the major causes of sinking hill road. The fifth guideline is operation maintenance guideline for mountainous highway. This shows guidance on operation maintenance, highlighted inspection of roadside structures, standards threshold on operation maintenance, arrangements on and operation of disaster prevention facilities of tunnels, and concept of early warning system for pre-closure of roads as a precaution against disastrous weather conditions. Next, please. Among the 5 guidelines, today I'd like to focus on 2 guidelines. One is tunnel guideline, another is slope guideline. The tunnel guideline, when we prepare the tunnel guideline, so there are some room for improvement in India. As of 2016. So at that time, India has experience in good condition only. India didn't have so much of difficult tunnel, excluding long-term tunnel. And to counteract difficult condition, like Himalayan tunnel through Himalaya, so the tunnel guideline showed some supplemental measures against difficult conditions such as fracture zone, shear zone, abrupt water coming. So all are in our guideline. And design construction without atmosphere. This was room for improvement at that time, so our guideline focuses on atmosphere. And also, at that time, some problem at portal zone was observed, so our tunnel guideline focuses on portal issue. Next, please. And the tunnel guideline also include safety and health during tunnel construction issue. So during tunnel construction, there are some problems on the right-hand side and measures to be taken on the, on the right side. So especially, and these measures are also included in IRC's SP 91 2019, but our guideline has more details, especially for the red-colored part, like safety inspection, emergency operation plan, and labor education. Next, please. And our JICA guideline also focuses on tunnel ventilation system. And actually, these ideas are also included in IRC SP 19, 2019. I think this is tunnel guideline. And design method, and the IRC SP 91 has conception of these ideas. But JICA tunnel guideline has the detail, especially for design method. So I think JICA tunnel guideline will be very nice supplement for IRC SP 91. Next, please. Okay, I want to explain about the slope guideline. And JICA slope guideline is another important guideline in the guidelines we prepared. So actually, JICA expert came to India from 2016, and we found Indian hill road is so challenging. And we think the reason why you have so challenging road is, next please. Next please. Yes, you have Himalayas. Himalaya is a very special condition, including the forefront mountains. So this is very specific particular condition we can see only in India. And through the site survey, we think, through the site survey, so Indian counterpart told us that you have a sinking section, very difficult part in operation maintenance of hill road. Then we look through the hill road and propose that we think gravity deformation of rock slope can be a cause of sinking section. And due to gravity deformation, there are so many slope failures not fall at sinking section. That is what we propose in JICA slope protection guideline. Next, please. Yes. This is just a summary of contents of guideline, actually features of guideline. So the JICA slope guideline is to add new technologies to the existing guideline. So additional supplementary information to India with new technology. And gravity deformation is highlighted because that is, we think it's major cause of sinking section. And conditions for slope stability analysis are detailed for various types of landslide. This is another interesting section, interest part in our JICA slope guideline, but I don't touch this point today. Please check our JICA guidelines. Then concrete clip works and horizontal drainage borings are highlighted. These are new technology from Japan, actually. And this technology was tried in pilot project in Sikkim. And especially, we focused on investigation and study for design, because in India, you have good consultant, good contractor who can make good road already, so construction-wise, no problem, design-wise, no problem. But we think Indian road sector might want to improve the survey and investigation of hill road. Next, please. And so we focused on investigation in the guideline, and chapter 1 is for investigation. And chapter 1 have 5 sections. 1.1, investigation of hill slope condition is the basis of investigation. So this is very basic. And other sections are depending on the timing of hill road development. Section 1.2 and 1.3 are for operation maintenance. So section 1.3 is aiming at landslide hazard affecting hill road in service. 1.3 is landslide hazards foreseen from current condition of hill road in service. Those are for operation maintenance issue. And if you want to widen the road, you please refer to 1.4 in addition to 1.1, 1.2, and 1.3. 1.4 is landslide foreseen from road widening by cutting and filling. And if you want to make road, new road in greenfield element, please refer to 1.5, landslide foreseen from new road construction. That is the contents of chapter 1. Next, please. And actually, those photos are explaining what chapter 1.2, 1.3, 1.4, 1.5 are aiming at. So chapter 1.2 is for visible landslide. So investigation for visible landslide is described in 1.2. And 1.3, invisible but foreseeable landslide. So in the photos of 1.3, you can see the railway track bended some part. So that is a sign of incoming landslide. And 1.4 is for road widening, and 1.5 is for greenfield alignment. So when you have totally new road, so what point you better to investigate are described in chapter 1.5. Next, please. Then I want to touch sinking section. So the very first timing I came to India for this particular project, so we had discussion with the Indian counterpart. Then most of the engineers told us, sinking section of hill road is a problem. So we looked through what sinking section is, and we think gravity deformation of bedrock slope is one of the major cause of sinking section. So the pilot project for the project was implemented for NH54 and 717. That is for including investigation of gravity deformation. And we try to seek solution to mitigate that gravity deformation, because gravity deformation is a very new phenomenon to Japan as well. Even in Japan, we have not yet established the investigation method or countermeasure method against gravity deformation. So we try to seek solution with Indian counterpart in this particular JICA technical cooperation project. And our try and error was recorded in the as a case study of the project and is included in the JICA slope guideline. Next, please. Yes, I want to explain what gravity deformation is and why hill roads sink. So gravity deformation is sometimes called gravitational deformation of rock slope. And that is a phenomena, rock slope with very steep, bedrock with very steep slope, gradually but steadily move down with cliff deformation of loosened zone. And figure on the left is showing the initial stage of hill road. So in the bedrock with fracture zone, very often we have loosened zone developing parallel to the slope. And with the action of gravity, so all of the rock part on the slope, especially it is steep slope, gravity will want to draw down bedrock slope, then at loosened section, that is very weak part in the bedrock, cause cliff deformation, then rock slope itself will move down very steadily but slowly. Then the shape of the slope is changed to the right. That is actually exaggerated. And road sinks along with the movement of bedrock. That is gravity deformation. And next, please. And gravity deformation of bedrock slope often shows some particular topographic features, like shown in this slide. So the double ridge structure or linear depression around the ridge. And photos on the right is showing the actual example of gravity deformation seen in Uttarakhand. So the picture and figure is showing the place of gravity deformation. So these topographic features will be the key to understand where you have gravity deformation. Next, please. Then gravity deformation of bedrock slope often develop into deep-seated landslide. Deep-seated landslide is a very devastating landslide, and we often suffer from it. The photo above, black and white photos are examples from Japan. So left is before deep-seated landslide occur, there's gravity deformation slope. After the deep-seated landslide, as you can see, big damage. Entire hill slope demolished. And we have the same situation in here in India at NH55 West Bengal. This is very famous Pagrajura landslide. We think that it's due to gravity deformation in deep-seated landslide. And also NH717 West Bengal, that's another big example of deep-seated landslide caused by gravity deformation. Next, please. And we try to, we prepared reference of gravity deformation in the particular project. And we added this reference to our JICA slope guideline. So we collected the study result in Japan regarding gravity deformation, because we try to explain what gravity deformation is and the latest study result in Japan to Indian side. And this is attached to the JICA slope guideline as appendix 2 or 3.
5 minutes more.
Okay, thank you. Next, please. And to identify gravity deformation, we often use map reading technology. So figure on the left is map reading for tunnel. So with map reading, we can identify lineament that suggests fault line, fracture zone, and also landslide. And in this particular example, the alignment in the middle is not good because portal is located in landslide area. Next, please. Yes. The figure on the right is showing how to detect gravity deformation from map reading. This is also touched in the JICA guideline. Next, please. Next. Okay, so these are the investigation for gravity deformation tried in the PART project for NH54. This is also included in JICA guideline. Next, please. And monitoring also was done. Next, please. And this is also very simple monitoring for detecting gravity deformation. This is also included in JICA guideline. Next, please. Yes, and the monitoring result was, this slide is explaining monitoring result. This is very essential information for the design of countermeasure. Next, please. Yes, then this is last topic, groundwater variation analysis chart, GVAC. And actually, to find out solution against gravity deformation, we need to know the property of loosened zone of bedrock. It's actually fracture zone of bedrock. And we need to get core sample of fracture zone bedrock, but this is quite difficult. Most of the case, core sample will be washed away. We cannot get no sample for loosened zone. So that means we have no information for loosened zone. But with this method, GVAC, you can estimate the condition of loosened zone by observing groundwater level every day, every morning, every evening of the working day. Next, please. And this is example of GVAC used in Japan, showing guideline. Next, please. And this is GVAC prepared by Indian consultant based on our guideline. So they themselves prepared this. We give some suggestion, some advice, but they prepared this. So by this information, we can do some design for countermeasure against gravity deformation. This is very good, nice work by Indian consultant. Next, please. And this is the information to make GVAC. This is a daily record of drilling. Every morning, every evening, after the work, before the work, we observe the groundwater level and record the casing depth. That is essential information. Next, please. And this is the last slide. So in this particular example, it's showing in some, how can I say, I can say that in English, sorry. But this drilling was planned up to the depth of here. But there was no groundwater observed. So we requested the government to extend the borehole length to detect groundwater level. Because detecting groundwater level is essential, very crucial and essential to understand loosened zone. So we, company drilled more than get groundwater level. So such sort of control of drilling is very important to get this GVAC for the design. Thank you so much.
Next presentation is by Shri K.C. Dunoli, the technical advisor to CM Government of Arunachal Pradesh on the disaster and climatic change resilient Arunachal experience and initiatives.
Half an hour, sir. Good afternoon to everyone. Honorable Chairman, respected co-chairman, Dr. Swami, IIT Delhi, and Mr. Yoshinori. In fact, Mr. Yoshinori has explained in detail, so he has also made my job easy for my presentation. In fact, my presentation is in three parts. First, I'll just cover the initial background, then the initiative by the Arunachal government, and third is about the way forward. So, next please. This here, I have just explained, in fact, there's a background. We all know that our Earth is heating up and how the temperature is increasing. If you just see the India, we just compared from the 1956 to 76 and 21, 22. So almost if you see plus 0.5 to 1.0, and northeast is little higher for that. So if you see the color from the northeast, so they have just given, in fact, about the temperature increase and all. And if we see to 2010 to 2020, it was the warmest decade. Next, please. If we see the northeastern states and climate change, we have been keep on observing. In fact, what happened, the rain is the major source of water, and glacier is not very common here. And the rainfall pattern, particularly, especially during the monsoon, are keep on changing. And when we see the data for last 22 years, the rainfall has been below normal, leaving the intermittent rain, high rain, cloud burst and all. And if you see the CSEC report, they have also given, in fact, some districts where the rainfall is very high, but most of the district, in fact, in the whole northeast, it is declining. Now, more than a century long, if you see the data set, it's showing a declining trend in the many states of the northeastern states. Next, please. When we see the climate change, what is happening in the whole northeastern region, in fact, we in the northeast, we are around 45 million, and we have around 8% of the national territory. What is the area of the India? We are around 8% of that, the whole northeastern states. When we see the climate vulnerability assessment adoption planning in India, in fact, we considered the 4 indicators in the beginning, Honorable Chairman was just mentioning, the socio-economic, demographic status, sensitivity of the agriculture production, forest-dependent livelihood, and the access to information service and infrastructure, which the Honorable Union Minister has also talked about yesterday during his inaugural session. Among the 10 most vulnerable states in the northeast, in fact, Arunachal is number 7, Mizoram number 2nd, Assam is number 5th, Arunachal number 7, and Tripura is number 10. So we are among, in fact, the most vulnerable states. We have to look what we have to do in the state of Arunachal Pradesh and northeast as a whole. The overall rainfall in northeast, in fact, has reduced in the past 3 decades. As I said, increase in some districts. This is based on the all IMD data. Next, please. Now, when we see the climate of northeast, the rainfall pattern and all, I say it is considerably changed. But there are some period where there are no rains and all, so it's basically a drought. Temperature is rising, rainfall intensity is increasing, and of course the reduction in its temporal spread as well as it declining the winter rain. We have heavy winter rains now, that winter rain also declining, which we call, in fact, the northeast monsoon. The soil of Brahmaputra, if we see soil of Brahmaputra, the whole river data are mostly sandy, and the water retention capacity is low. So which also creates a fear of scarcity, and that is what the government also thinking on that and working on that in the whole northeastern region. The drying of the mountain spring, as per the Niti Aayog report, as per 200 springs, they are directly primary source of water for the mountainous villages, and they are also gradually drying up. If we see the mountain regions, in fact, the Sikkim is over 94% villages have mountain springs. In the Meghalaya and Mizoram and Manipur, considerably 55, 54 and 54%. And when we come to Nagaland and Arunachal, have around 44 and 37.3%, because we are dependent on that. So if the springs are drying up, we will have big problem for the water supply and all. So we have to also look forward how basically we can able to have these sources continues to be there so that we can able to tap and harness the water. Next, please. When we look for Arunachal and the climate change, in fact, these are some of the threats which I have just described. We are 7th rank in the high vulnerability in the Indian state. We are increasing frequency in high intensity of extreme rainfall, which I have just mentioned. Recurrent landslides, very common now. In fact, last week there was a very heavy landslide in the central part of the Arunachal Pradesh where we have a lot of damages taken place. Heavy soil erosion, flash floods, and of course the adversity impacting the overall economy of the state. We have frequent droughts, 26% of our GDP from the Arunachal Pradesh, basically from the climate sensitive agriculture. This is all a very important aspects for the threats and vulnerability. 77% of the population of rural area directly and indirectly dependent on the agriculture production in the state. When the temperature also rising, implications of water resources, agriculture, forest ecosystem, of course infrastructure among others, as per our NECCAP report, which the Ministry of Donor, they are working under Ministry of Donor. We have some of the strengths which I have highlighted here. We have largest forest cover, We have the largest carbon stock, which is 1203.84 million as per the ISFR report. We have huge hydropower potential of 57,000 megawatt. 815 is already operational, 2600 megawatt is of course under construction. And Arunachal has aligned its state budgetary allocation with we call the sustainable development goal, which the UN has described. So these are also basically we are considering if we see the Vision 2030 document. Next, please. Now coming to the one of the districts of Pake Kesang, which is of course the central part of the Arunachal Pradesh. What are the changes taken place? Microclimatic changes. We see Pake Tiger Reserve in Sijusa. Now sand and boulder mining going on. The Pake Width river has increased after devastating flood. In fact, there are some more rivers also which has been meandering is there, and these have also been, the width has been increased, and they river are flowing, they are earlier flowing around 5 to 10 meters, they have gone 20 to 30 meters like that. So they are all damaging all nearby villages, habitation, agricultural land, everything is there. So this is another main concern for all of us. Many rare species like one blithe kingfisher, they are dwindling, they are not available. So this is also the impact of the climate change. The movement of elephant within the reserve corridor has been changed. We have been observing the elephant corridor, different corridors are there, but the corridors are being changed because of the various factors, including the deforestation and all. Next, please. Another district called West Kameng, it is the western part of Arunachal Pradesh. When you travel to Tawang, there is a district, West Kameng, in the central part of the western part of that, and we have construction of highway in the district has affected the health of spring. There are human interventions, and there are 10 springs from a foothills areas called Bhalokpung at Assam-Arunachal border, and up to the Morgung village in the West Kameng district had dried up. And what is the reasons for that? Reasons for we are explaining, and climate change is one of them. Singchung village, it's witnessing some of the major changes, in fact, to biodiversity and the climate indicator due to the climate change. So this is what we are observing. This is one village where we have keep on observing for that, and I have also keep on visiting these areas. Next, please. Now, what infrastructure at risk? What I've been talking yesterday in the inaugural function, we have all talked about the infrastructure and why infrastructure at risk and how possibly we can take care of these infrastructure. The roads, the bridges and the culverts, which we have been discussing, deliberating here in the 3 days conference in IRC, the most susceptible and increased runoff during the major storm event during the monsoon rain. Intensity is increasing. The structure failures are there because of washout, plugging, overtopping, diversion, scoring, all these are happening. So our structures are failing. Why these are failing? We are also studying and we are also looking into that. But what is the reason for that? How we can plan so that these structures can remain intact? There is a substantial but significant impact to infrastructure result of changing climate. If you see some of the photos where I am saying less snowpacks, damage to the pavements of high temperatures, and most dust on surface roads and drying of traditional water resources. So these are some of the reasons which we say what is the significant impact on the infrastructure. Next, please. In fact, the pavement also, which Dr. Swami is talking on that I am not covering all detail for that, because Yoshinori has already covered some of the design features, and Dr. Swami is also talking on the pavement design in the climate resilient technology. So I am not covering those topics. Now, why road planning and management? We require a good transport planning as well as good design, which minimize the impact from the climate related storms. That is also yesterday highlighted by the Honorable Union Minister, Surface Transport. A detailed DPR, which is a critical step, is comprehensive project planning and development is most important part for the DPR when we do the planning for the road construction and the bridge. Good DPR is expected to be the cost effective, contain an executive proposal with the minimum social and environmental impact. Of course, the DPR should have the climate resilience aspect into the proposal. And of course, most important that it should satisfy the need of the people who are expected to be the beneficiary as a part of stakeholder. Those people who lives, in fact, the area, the all stakeholder, their concerns should be addressed in the DPR. Next, please. Now, when we see the road planning and all, the road infrastructure, we have also to look into the social and environmental sustainability. One of the advantage of that, because this has already been deliberated in one of the UN conference, the flooding where the structure need to be replaced on the concept of the build back and better. So that when we have these kind of floods are there, we look into all the structure and make the structure which should be suitable and which can take care of the all kind of the effects of the climate change in future for that. So this is one of the concepts which have been deliberated and discussed in one of the UN conference. The opportunity should be taken to improve the rural infrastructure when it has to be replaced. Whenever we replace, we have to consider all the data, which Mr. Yoshinori has also explained in his presentation. Now, improved construction standard, higher quality material, large span and size of the structures, freeboard, etc. All these are basically to make a project better and more resilient for the future climate viable events. So these are some of the factors which have to be taken into consideration, including the local knowledge of that area is very important. Next, please. Talking of the slope, which Mr. Yoshinori has also explained in detail, the slope stability is a very big issue in the hill areas, all the hill areas in the complex terrain, and where we have basically the fragile geological conditions and the complications of the fragile hills. Now, slope failures are occurring because by limited site investigation, standard slope assessment practice, and of course, vulnerability of the slope to adverse but unseen geological features and hydrological conditions. So this is also very important. Why we have been talking for the local knowledge and all? Because when we do designing a culvert, designing a bridge, we have to take into consideration the local, the water which makes the basically it pass passages during the rainfall, and we have to look into that, which are the areas where the water makes its passages on the hills, and water where it accumulates, and how much water is basically able to collect in one particular place. And this also need to have a thorough investigation, more robust design, of course, and for adoption, particularly when a critical slope is there, and where there is a history of instability or sinking zone, what Mr. Yoshinori was talking about. Now, when we see rainfall, the rainfall intensity for different durations should be considered as a new reference design, rainfall intensity, slope stabilization and drainage. This is again important because when we look into the rainfall data, we have to consider the high intensity rainfall, like what is happening this year for last 6 months. We have a very high intensity rainfall which we have never experienced in the last 10 years. So those kind of intensity we have to take into consideration, which can take care of all the structures which we have constructed. We have one small video which is looking after how the slope is being failed in one of the districts called Kurunkume recently. In fact, 15 days back it happened. Click for video, please. A small video for that. How basically the whole hill is going down. See, this is the place where there was no slope problem was there. There was no landslide. The whole stable hills was there. But suddenly, because of the heavy, high intensity rain, one fine morning, this happened for that, and that has taken whole our formation have been washed away. Our structures, nearby structures, have been totally damaged, and this has created communication problem, and the road was basically closed for around 3 days, and that was the problem for that. And this kind of things are happening quite often, and this is because of the effect of the climate change. That's why looking for climate resilient technology when we are looking for the slope stability, how we can able to stabilize the slope. Next, please. Now, what we need to be done, more wide-ranging, in-depth research into impacts of the climate change, which Honorable Chairman mentioned just in opening remark. Yesterday it was also mentioned by the Honorable Minister and Honorable Chief Minister. A study of the combined impact of the climate change and human intervention, especially when they're drying mountains, springs and all, which I have just mentioned. We'll require more meteorological stations all in the hills and the mountains so that we have more data from different pockets. That is required. So we need to have equal distribution of the meteorological stations which can able to collect the data. Adoption strategy, particularly involvement, building resilience and adaptation changes which is taking place. We have to have a strategy for that. We have to plan for that, where we are working. Traditional knowledge to be with the local people, which should be combined with the modern science and technology, as I've just mentioned. So this has to be considered, the local knowledge, very, very important when we are talking of the latest technology. Next, please. Now, what initiative Arunachal government has taken? The Arunachal government is one of the first states in the country who adopt the climate change resilient and responsive Arunachal Pradesh by the name called Pake Tiger Reserve 2047. In fact, there the whole cabinet was there, and Union Minister Environment and Forest, he was there in Arunachal, They have held detailed discussion, and we have adopted, it is named as a Parquet Tiger Reserve 2047. By that time, we have to achieve the target of net zero emission, which Honorable Prime Minister has declared in COP26. So this is our, again, target for emission by 2046. This declaration has been notified on the 2nd December 2021 by the government of Arunachal Pradesh. Now there are 75 strategies in that declaration proposed a way forward for the climate resilient Arunachal Pradesh, what we have to do. And 75 strategies basically symbolizes also the 75th year of the independence of India and in the Amrit Mahotsav. One of the strategies is sustainable transport system, which covers all road, bridges, and all infrastructure looking for the transport system. Next, please. Now, this is Packet Teaser 2047 declaration. This is change, response, and response to Arunachal Pradesh. They are some of the 5 pillars based on that we considered while framing the whole Packet Teaser climate resolution. And these are the environment, forest, evidence generation and collaborative action, health and well-being of, and of course sustainable and adaptive living. This is very important. So based on that, we have certain unique innovation. What are the advantages for that? The whole government is working on that. The multi-tier institutional arrangement for implementation for that. We are setting up the whole secretariat basically for the Tiger 2047 responsive Arunachal climate resilient technology. We will have the definite budget allotment, and we will have robust monitoring and evaluation framework. We are all working on that, and we are also looking for that how possibly we have the good infrastructure so that we can have the basically carbon free, minimum reduced carbon smart infrastructure. Next please. Yeah, next please. This is way forward. I'm just coming to closer. Way forward. Infrastructure created under PMGS for other schemes is vulnerable to many climate. Now we need continuous monitoring as well as proactive maintenance. This is important what we have discussed. So this is we are looking for. We are making also a policy for that. And projected climate change, more specific short-term and long-term action plan required for infrastructure. This is also one of the important requirements. And of course, back karo, just back. And limited funding and resources deal with the climate variability, assessment of resources, and risks they present. And we have to do prioritization because of the constraint of funds, and we have to look for the more money which can able to address the requirement. Next, please. Now, the Ministry of Rural Development, NRRDA, has also brought a very beautiful book, and there are a lot of discussion, Vision Document 2022. And this also contains all the new technology, which is a very useful document for dissemination of all stakeholders, and this will address most of the issues basically on the carbon emissions. This also evolving environmentally optimized and climate resilient design for rural roads. This is also important for that. Next, please. Now, there is a book which has been written by Mr. Bill Gates, How to Avoid a Climate Disaster. So Bill Gates, after having a decade study, he has come out with this book. This is a very good book where he has described how possibly, basically, we have to adopt the various measures. Now, he said 2 important things. One is the 51 billion to zero. 51 billion? 51 billion tons is the carbon which is being, in fact, added every year to the whole world, whole globe, and how we can bring to zero. So this is the important target which Honorable Prime Minister says we have to bring the emission to the zero, net zero. So we have to bring 51 billion to zero, and that is what they are, and we are looking for that, how possibly they very comprehensively, the author has described various measures for that, and some of the measures which we are already adopting. So we look forward, possibly we will have the good climate resilient technology. We will able to have the carbon reduction emission, and by 2030, probably we will be reducing by 1 million of the 1 million tons of the carbon emission, and maybe by 2047 we have a net zero emission. With these targets, the Arunachal is working on that. We are looking for more climate resilient infrastructure in the years to come, and probably we are committed to that, and Arunachal is committed for the climate resilient infrastructure, and we hope with all your blessings and all, probably we will able to achieve, we will do that, and we will make the Arunachal climate resilient infrastructure state in the country. Thank you very much.
Uh, Good afternoon, everyone. The tone has been set by previous two speakers, Mr. Yoshinori and Dimology. From previous two presentations, it's clear where say we are looking at a scenario where things can change and then it's going to affect everybody. Where say it's not a single instance, but as a system, where say transportation infrastructure, where like it is dependent on say other aspects like water resource infrastructure in place, so on. So now that brings to an issue where say down the line, like we are looking at a multi-hazard scenario. It's going to have a cascading effect. However, my presentation, like I'm sticking to the one of the small part, that's the payment infrastructure, how like it's going to have a role, right? I'm Arvind Krishnaswamy from IIT Delhi. Primarily, I work on climate issues recently. Payment design, payment analysis, that's my basic area of research and teaching. Yeah, next slide, please. Here's the overview of the presentation. Like we say, why we need to worry about this scenario with Indian context. That's where like we look at the overview of Indian's road sector, followed by some of the major issues with climate change and what would be the repercussions. And then as an example, like I'm taking up air temperature prediction, like which is important for the payment design as such, and then couple of applications. Yeah, next slide, please. Here's a case like if you look at Indian context, like we really boast about really big infrastructure, say starting with the road length, where like we stand at number 2 in the world in terms of the road length. What we have, it's 6.2 million kilometers. It's a really big network what we are looking at. This is as per 2020. And however, like if you look at the other part, in this like we say, how much road like we have per unit area, that's like normally characterized by kilometer per kilometer square of area. So we are well below. We are standing at around 16th place in the world at this particular point of time. Next slide, please. And again, within which, like we say, over a period of time, like we have expanded our network, road network, vastly. So like starting from 1951 until 2020, like if you look at, like we say, we are reaching 5 million kilometers of road, all categories put together. And if you look at the percentage part, like which is shown in the right bar chart, predominantly we are looking at the blue one, that's the rural roads, right? Usually the rural roads, like what we are intending is like it's ideally it should be an all-weather road, but unfortunately for based on what are the limitations, like we end up with seasonal roads like as such, right? Like so that brings the issue where when it comes to climate change, it's going to affect significantly across the country. Yeah, next slide, please. And again, within which like once we are looking at 2020. Rural roads, like significantly, it's around 70% of the road network. National highway system, like we're saying, around 2 to 3%, like that's what we are looking at. So most of those cases, like we're saying, we are looking at like a really good infrastructure, like design consideration taken into place. But with low volume roads, that's unfortunately not the case. And again, like if you look at the paved versus unpaved road, like we're saying, around 60-65%, that's what like we are looking at, say like. Paved roads at this particular point of time. Yeah, next slide, please. And now with that, like we say, on the other hand, like once we are looking at the vehicles, what we are looking at, we have a huge population which is using it. Like so, with that, like we say, even if you go with 2020, we are looking at 22 cars per 1,000 people at present, right? Now it may be around 23, 24 at this particular point of time. As opposed to, like if you look at the right topmost figure, where say there are other countries like where like it's in triple digits. Like so, with that, like say we are on safer side at this particular point, and bottom ones are with respect to specific states, like what we are looking at. Message is like we say if you are looking at bottom right one, like we say we have seeing exponential growth with the vehicles with Indian context. Like that we just have to accept, and then like we need to. Design our infrastructure, like we say, it can be taken care like with these vehicles. If not, like we are ending up with be a really big trouble down the line. Next slide, please. And again, like we say, if we look at the road network, like we say, what you are talking about the paved roads, like we say, we are looking at 2 to 3%. Like in terms of percentage of roads, it's on lower side, but these are the ones like which are carrying significant vehicle, the traffic in terms of freight or people. 80% of passenger traffic, like it's a really overloaded system as a whole. That's an issue which we are looking at. Like that's the road network, and again within which like of these 80%, like we are looking at 40% of the traffic, like which is through national highway system, which means like we have a issue with our national highway system which we are operating. Next slide, please. So that's where essentially like we or 25 years back, like we started expanding our national highway system, northeast, north, south, east, west corridor, like we say looking at 7,000, 8,000 kilometer, go down quadrilateral again around 6,000 kilometers, which we intended to build. Yeah, next slide, please. However, like with that, like we say, even at that particular point, like there were several studies, like we say they documented, like India needs to invest a lot of money back in 2009, and now if you look at the current investment over past 8-9 years, we have surpassed like whatever the estimate like which we had. Like we say, definitely we are emphasizing and putting a lot of money into the highway infrastructure in place. Next slide, please. Now with that, like we say, recent updates are Bharatmala project and Sagarmala project. Like basically we are looking at connecting hinterland with all border areas and then coastal areas all together. Yeah, next slide, please. That brings to issue of pavement design. In general, like what we are looking at is like the topmost ones, traffic, foundation, climate, and material properties. These would be the typical input into our pavement design. In this, like say, first and foremost, what is the traffic we are looking at, based on which like we need to design the pavement structure. And other is like the foundation, that's the existing soil or local strata, what is available, like, and what can be used to a possible extent. That brings to issue the site-specific conditions where the climate comes into picture. And followed by the material properties, like we often end up with materials, like we need to get it from borrow beds or from other locations, which will have the database, use those input, and then come up with say trial sections, like cross sections, like which might work, might not work. Based on experience, like we can end up with like say some trial sections. Then we use any pavement analysis softwares, like classic one is IIT Pave. You get the stress and strain at different locations, critical locations, look at it. Using those values, stress and strain values, like we predict like what would be the distress and then like what would be the number of fatigue cycles, rutting cycles, which the pavement can sustain before it fails for the design period, so on. Now that's essentially the damage accumulation part, and then we look at, okay, at the end of the design life, 25 years, 15 years, whatever may be the case, whether it's going to meet the requirement. Once it's going to meet the requirement, that's sort of okay. If that is not the case, then like we say, we need to alter the cross sections and then go back and then redo the whole exercise. Then at the end, like we end up with a couple of solutions, like feasible pavement design thickness, which is going to work, and finally we would select the one like which is going to work for us. That brings the issue of climate change, like we have to be a bit careful. Next slide, please. Which again goes back to various issues in terms of greenhouse emissions, principal contributor, starting with the industries, like what we do have. And again, transportation sector by itself, like we are a significant contributor in terms of all these greenhouse gases, and then like these subsequent issues, what we are looking at, which is leading towards the climate change. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Presenter ones. That's the case, like we say, what we are looking at, like really green scenario with this climate change, like it's going to lead to a scenario where like, things are not so good, which we do expect, which we need to move on still further. Next slide, please. So with that, like we say, if you look at Indian context, we have Himalayan region, like upper, like snow-capped mountains. Down south, like we have the coastal belt. So with that, like what we can expect is, like say, melting of ice, sea level is going to rise, some hurricanes in the coastal belt, heat waves for sure. Where say the as being told, like we say, the overall, like we are seeing a rise in the temperature. And of course, the extreme precipitation, like we have significant rainfall within short period of time. These are the macroscopic issues, like which we can look at. Next slide, please. So as a consequence, like what you are looking at is, like say, it's going to disrupt the overall system. It's just not the pavement network or transportation network, where like it's going to disrupt water supply, natural or artificial or man-made ones, electricity grid for sure, and then the transportation network, but not least. So now with that, like once we are looking at, we are expecting something to happen. So that means like we need to take steps to get over those issues, what we can expect, or we say once we know we are expecting something, what best I can do to get over that particular scenario, and then like yet to have my system in place, right? That's the adaptation part which comes into picture. Next slide, please. So first and foremost, like if you are looking at the snow-capped mountains, Himalayan region, we have this snow, and then due to pollution issues, like we have this aerosol matter, like which is just flying and then reaching the upper caps of Himalayan region, which are typically dark in color. So as a consequence, like these are the materials, like once they deposit on the snow, which is going to absorb heat. As a consequence, we are seeing rise in temperature in those Himalayan region as well. So as a consequence, like we can expect flash floods because of the snow melt, and as well as the precipitation which can happen. So that brings to issue of flood risk at any point of time, as we have seen back in 2013, where like Kedarnath, like we unfortunate incident, as well as recently, like we have like a lot of landslides which are happening in this Himalayan region. Right? Yeah, next slide, please. And of course, like with that, like we have like several structural measures and non-structural measures, which predominantly gets into the domain of water resource engineers. So primarily channelization, building of additional infrastructure, dams, so on. So that's something like which we can do, and then of course like we can have some predictive models, and then at least making people aware, and then they can move to safer places. Right? Next slide, please. And of course, this is an interesting part. Like we say, if you look at the region, upper reaches of Canada and US, close to Arctic Circle, like there are a couple of mines, diamond mines, like which are profitable, and there are oil reserves as well. So with those reasons, like what they have is like during the month of March, February and March, when the ice is still in solid form, that's when the vehicles can move on these, say like lakes. And once the snow starts melting, that's when like these roads, what we do refer to as ice roads, they are just closed. It's just not operable. So these are some of the issues, like we said, it's going to affect, like for us, like this is from the other part of the world, like we just thought like it's of interesting topic for us. Yeah, next slide, please. And of course, like with the Indian context, like we said, with the seashore, like we do expect overall rise in the sea level. Like so, as a consequence, like all the pavement infrastructure, like we said, once it's going to get saturated, like we have issues with softening of the material, underlying the geological material, so on. So which we need to be a bit careful. Yeah, next slide. And of course, like we can expect some hurricane issues. Next slide, please. This is the issue where, like, in terms of overall rise in the temperature, which we can expect. Often we do refer to as heat waves. Mostly with the media, like we do hear this term. Oh, okay, we have a heat wave going on for next 1 week, so on. So these are a couple of cases. Like recent one is with UK. Like we say, this summer, lot of pavement infrastructure, like it just got softened, like, and then like that's what like they did have, like, and then by even in with Indian context, like we do have this issue often during summer, where like temperature rises, and then like we have issues. Next slide, please. Now with that, like if you go back to our pavement design guidelines, like we have our benchmark IRC 37. Once we are looking at the flexible pavement, like we require bitumen, like we have to go back to IS 73. That's the bitumen standards. So now if you look at IS 73, this is a nice table, like it gives link between whatever the grade of binder which you are going to use, and then the corresponding temperature which you are looking at. In this, like VG10, that's supposed to be used when the temperature, 7-day average temperature, which we can expect, is less than 30 degrees Celsius. So on. Note that, like we say, the point which is making is that, like we are looking at, like say, the 7-day average maximum air temperature, typically during the summer part, not less than 5 years from start of the design life. Right? So that's something like which guides us. Okay, like I need to predict like, what is going to happen in future. Right? Yeah. Next slide, please. With that, like this goes back to this particular table. Like we have a lot of specifications where viscosity values, so on, at different temperature, which we need to use, and accordingly, like we have this table which comes into picture, right? Or different grades of binder. Yeah. Next slide. Of course, like that's where like actually typically we do see the values in terms of penetration and viscosity, which we do as an indicator. Higher the temperature, like we say, I require binder to have higher viscosity, like so that like the pavement stays in right condition. Next slide, please. Now, if you look at like what US did, like that's the super specification, to look at this particular temperature issue, like they collected data for more than 20 years. On daily basis, like, and then they had the network of 7,500 weather stations. Imagine the kind of data which was used to develop these models, and then like we say, what they did was like say 7-day maximum 7-day temperature maximum, that's the moving average one, which is predicted for pavement at 20 millimeter below pavement surface, as well as 1 day is concerned, like that's the coldest one, which is taken just on the surface, right? And now with that, like they have this particular model where like which is going to link pavement temperature with air temperature, depth of the pavement, where like we are looking at, and then the latitude. Next slide, please. And of course, like, there are several researchers like, who have worked on this particular issue. Some of the widely used models are given over here. Next slide, please. That brings the issue where like, if I can expect climate change to happen, I need to take care of that issue to a large extent. So that means like if I am predicting worst case scenario, probably that's going to take care of some fluctuations which are going to happen with climate change, right? That brings the issue of reliability or statistical analysis over here, where say typically we know like the normal distribution which usually works, plus or minus 1 time standard deviation, that's going to cover 68% of area, so on. So now with this particular concept, like what we typically do is like if I know a particular location, average temperature which you can expect based on past n number of years of data, average value that gives you like 50% reliability of 50%, like that's the probability of 0.5, where like if I move towards the right, like we say I expect, say like I have a 40-degree temperature, but I say like, okay, like it's going to be 48. That means like I'm increasing, I'm giving a value which is going to happen on a rarer side, but at any given point of time in a given year, like we say that's going to satisfy that particular requirement. Because like the temperature would be lower than that particular value, that's where like, we need to move towards the right side, which gives the higher reliability. Yeah, next slide, please. Next slide. Now this was the case, like say Indian Meteorological Department, like they had this particular data, like where say 1 degree in east-west direction, north-south direction. So they had this particular database, like roughly 1 degree translates to 100 kilometer square grid. This particular database was available for us like starting from 1951 to 2013. So if I look at like the 7-day maximum temperature which was computed using this particular database, this many years, 51 to 13 multiplied by 365 days, like that, that was the kind of data what we had, based on which like say once we computed like these values, we did see like reasonable correlation with respect to if you move from north to south or east to west direction. Next slide, please. And now with that, like we say, if I take these 3 cities, Delhi, Bangalore, and Chennai, we say Delhi and Bangalore, like they are pretty much on same longitude. Past 15 years data, we say 25-year data, like that has been plotted over here. If you see, like we say, there is significant difference. That Delhi is the blue one versus the green dotted ones. That's for Bangalore. And similarly, Chennai versus Bangalore, pretty much on same latitude. We see that interaction happening. We say, depending on the location where I am, the temperature is going to be different. And then, like we say, we do see certain fluctuation over a period of time. Yeah. Next slide. So that's where like the average value has been marked with these dots or straight lines. So those are the average values which we are looking at. That corresponds to 50% reliability or probability of 0.5. Next slide. And that's where actually once we move towards the prediction of these values, like because like say once I'm looking at the whole grid, I need for like these many locations, like say 31 multiplied by 31, like that's the grid size which you are looking at. For all these points, we resorted to this particular gene expression programming, like that's a machine learning based scheme where like I'm looking at a optimization process where like I'm going to find the best possible equation itself, right? So now this is the case, like basically at the end, like we would end up with a equation which anybody on site can use, as opposed to case with certain machine learning schemes which are computer based, so which means like I need to have a computer at the end to predict what are the values. But here in this particular case, that's not the case. And of course, like this has a higher efficiency as a consequence, like we have better accuracy coming up here as well. Next slide, please. This is where essentially what this is the overall architecture of this gene expression program. What we do is like we give the input. In this particular case, like latitude and longitude, give that input, and then the program itself is going to look for certain equations which possibly it treats a better solution. So now based on those solutions, like we would have a set of equations, 10, 12, 100, whatever, compare it and then pick the best one from that particular lot. Now since this is the first iteration, like I need to alter this particular equation because like that trial, like what equation I have might not be the best one. Or it might be a case by chance, like that might be the best one, like we really don't know. So that under these circumstances, what we do is like we go for this gene mutation, so on, mutation, rotation, recombination, so on. So as a consequence, like we have this set of equations, we alter those equations, then compare again. And now this exercise is going to be repeated really large number of cycles. Yeah, next. This can go for lakhs of iteration. It's like with this particular exercise, like what we did have is high performance computing available within the IIT Delhi system. We ran it for 1 lakh iterations, which went for 2 weeks at stretch. No break in between. And then after this particular case, like we got this best predictive equation. That's how like this will algorithm will go on. Next slide, please. And now as a consequence, we ended up with this particular expression. So 7-day maximum temperature, like E is going to be a function of latitude, longitude indicated by LT and Ln. K1 and Ki and Ci, these are the regression coefficients, right? And now again, this is dependent on like several other factors. So like with that, like we say, once we had this particular model, we looked at the coefficient of correlation, and that's the Pearson coefficient, so on. R square and then adjusted R square values, like which were reasonable enough, like for given this particular data set, like which is acceptable with R circumstance. Like that's the which is shown in this plot, like the measured values, 7-day average on horizontal axis, vertical axis gives you the predicted temperature. And then the smaller portion screen graph that's shown on the right side, like which essentially we see most of these points are along the line of equality, that's the red line. Some scatter is there, like which is expected most of the time with this statistical analysis. Next slide, please.
5 minutes.
Yeah, 4 more slides, that's it. So now, as a consequence, once we had this particular model, like we say, we predicted for each latitude and longitude. Now, this is the map, like what we had, like we say, for 50% reliability, that's 0.5. Green ones, like where the temperature is less than 30 degrees Celsius, those are the 5 dots, like which we see the topmost one. As opposed to case like the red ones, like 45 to 49 degrees Celsius, that's mostly some parts of Madhya Pradesh and then Rajasthan, right? Yeah, next slide. Now this is the case, like we say, what we are looking at is like for different reliability. We repeated this exercise for other reliability levels. As a consequence, we see like we say higher the reliability would mean like I am predicting higher temperature. This is what is seen over here. You see like the red dots increase significantly when it comes to 99% reliability. Yeah, next slide, please. Now the major application with this particular predictive model is like we say, we have an expression which field engineer can use straight away. As opposed to case with most of the machine learning models, like we say, we require a computer and then all the algorithms should be in the backend. Whereas in this particular case, like you have this expression, like anybody with calculator can just find for that particular latitude and longitude. So like depending on the project location, one can get the latitude and longitude. Like you just give those as input, you get the final output, like which can be used to get like 7-day maximum temperature for a given reliability as well, right? And of course, let's say that's the case, like we say, once we are looking at a particular project, like say that's going to be site specific. And further, like for a case of like say important, depending on the importance of project, like where like we can go for higher reliability. Next slide. This is the case, like we say, if I'm looking at say a village road where like it's not going to matter to that extent. If I take that particular hypothesis, then 50% reliability is sort of okay. As opposed to like if I'm looking at like a national highway, then like which means like I need to have a foolproof system in place, which means like I need to go for higher reliability. So practical application is like if you go back to IS 73, where like depending on the temperature, like we have recommendation which particular grade of binder to be used. So now this is the map like which would show okay like depending on these particular locations, like what grade of binder to be used. The left one for 50% reliability, as opposed to case with 99% reliability. We see significant portion of India is getting towards VG40. Note that this is just based on high temperature specifications only. We are completely ignoring the low temperature issues at this particular point of time. So once we have that 1-day minimum temperature issue coming up, this map or like these recommendations based on VG 10, 20, 30, 40 is going to be different. This is purely based on the 7-day maximum temperature considerations. Yeah, next slide, please. Yeah, with that, like I'm going to stop at this particular point of time. Any questions, I will be happy to answer, and then like you can shoot me an email as well, and then thank you.
Developing may not be Same for all the locations, depending upon the geological conditions, the availability of material, and the humidity. The equation may have to be aligned with those conditions in the vast country where we have road in different geographical conditions. Thank you. Before we conclude the session, I would like that we should take up the question answer session. If questions are there, then the audience can take up one by one and they can address the question to the author concerned. So we can take up the question. Please, if there is somebody, kindly can.
सर मेरे क्वेश्चन नहीं सर, मेरी जिज्ञासा है और इस मंच से कि सर एक्चुअली जितना भी
आपका क्वेश्चन
Introduce yourself first.
प्लीज.
माई सेल्फ KS चौहान फ्रॉम अल्ट्राटेक सीमेंट दिल्ली. मैं ये जानना सर, एज ए सिविल इंजीनियर सर, मैं ये जानने की कोशिश कर रहा था कि हम
To whom your question is addressed?
कंप्लीट डाइज सर.
No, no, you ask question from particular.
सर एज ए सिविल इंजीनियर सर, हम लोग ये कोशिश कर रहे हैं कि हमारा रूरल बेल्ट में और अर्बन बेल्ट में जितने भी रोड्स बने, वो मतलब जितना इस्टेब्लिशमेंट है वो चाहते हैं हम 100 साल 200 साल तक रहे, लेकिन उसकी कनेक्टिंग जो भी लाइफलाइन है रोड्स, वो हम सिर्फ अभी 20 साल के लिए सोचते हैं. हम 200 साल के लिए क्यों नहीं सोच पाते? पहला क्वेश्चन. और दूसरा सर, बिटुमिन का ये प्रूवन है कि ये डिटोरिएटिंग है, सेल्फ डिटोरिएटिंग नेचर का है सर. तो हम इसी पे सब एम्फेसाइज करके इतने सालों से, पिछले 70 सालों से हम सिर्फ बिटुमिन रोड पर ही जा रहे हैं. अगर हमारे पास में अल्टरनेट में अगर कंक्रीट अवेलेबल है और कंक्रीट ऑलरेडी टेस्टेड है सर, तो वाई वी आर नॉट ऑप्टिंग दिस ओनली बिकॉज ऑफ बजट कंस्ट्रेंट्स और एनीथिंग एल्स? बिकॉज बिटुमिन ने सर एक पैरेलल इंडस्ट्री खड़ा कर दिया, जिसमें हम इमल्शन की बात करते हैं, जिसमें हम और भी कोई एडिटिव्स की, केमिकल्स की बात करते हैं. अल्टीमेटली बिटुमिन तो सर ख़राब हो ही रहा है, और अभी भी हम सोचकर ज़्यादा से ज़्यादा 20 साल के एज के बारे में सोच पा रहे हैं सर.
I will give you one line answer to you, Mr. Chauhan. You are Mr. Chauhan. No? See, we are a vast country and still developing. For constructing any infrastructure, we need finance, and the finance will come from people. So we can't construct a infrastructure for the next 200 years, because then the present generation will be burdened. Normally we think of, earlier we used to think only for 5 years, there were 5-year plans. So we used to think only for 5 years, so that the generation which is present, that is burdened, next 5 years, next generation will be burdened, so that the burden was shared. If we do the planning for 2 years right now, the present generation will be burdened, the next 75 generation will enjoy, they will not do anything. So this is the first answer. Second is, you asked that why we are going for the bitumen road. The bitumen is flexible. The road is damaged, within 1 hour you can repair it. But the concrete takes minimum 28 days after repair. And you can't stop the people from using, because if just you repair, within 10 minutes people will start using, you can't stop. This is your second answer. Therefore, the bitumen road are the best. That is why we call it flexible road. Though we are switching over to the cement, and cement roads are being done, but still you can see wherever these are cut, then the repair of the cement road is very difficult. Cement does not, excuse, it punishes.
Both have their merits and demerits, so let's, thank you.
Good afternoon, sir. This is Ashish Walias, a scientist from CRI. My question is with Swami, sir. Sir, the temperature prediction model, what you have developed, any field validation is done for that?
This is based on the past data available.
Yes, sir.
IMD data. This is like, say, as far as the validation is concerned, there are limited efforts which were done with Indian context of 30 years back in HRS, Chennai, at a particular location. Yeah, apart from that, we don't have that many studies which are done. So probably that's a time we need to start pushing and getting that data from field.
So second thing is, in that model, the only input parameters are latitude and longitude.
Yes.
But you have also shown that, for Bangalore and Chennai, the difference between those values are not much different, quite different. But the 7-day temperature would obviously be much difference in that. So how we can cope up with this?
So that's the case, you have an interaction between latitude and longitude as well.
Yes, sir.
At a particular latitude or longitude, same longitude, but the latitude is different, so that's why we see the difference. Similarly, from the other side, where I have a particular latitude, same location, depending on the longitude, like the effect is going to be different, because like you have the other issues coming up in this, like as was pointed out by Bansalji, that like basically site-specific locations, site-specific issues, that's what we refer to as microclimatic conditions, that's going to play a role, right? So now this is the model like which we are giving, because like IS 73 gives for air temperature. It's not like IS 73 because like it's with binder special, they give for binder only. Now it's the IRC 37 responsibility to translate that from air temperature to pavement temperature. That still, there are not many exercises which are done.
It's a first effort. A validation will happen in due course of time. So it's a good effort.
Last question is mine. Like at what depth we are measuring this, or we are predicting the
theoretical models are there. Like we say, they predict like it's no higher temperature happens somewhere in between. It's not on the surface or at the bottom. Whereas minimum temperature happens at the critical minimum temperature, which is going to affect, is going to be on the surface, right? So empirically, US did come up with this 20 millimeter, like which roughly translate to 1 inch for them. Practically easy enough, like drill a hole with a drill bit for 1 inch, put a sensor over there, and then get the models, like or they measure the values over there. So that's how like they ended up with this 20 millimeter, which mostly correlates with that.
The temperature profile,
like higher the temperature, and then it goes back to lower value.
So we are expecting the maximum temperature would be around at 20 mm, irrespective of whatever.
Rule of thumb, like you can take around 10 to 15 degrees more than air temperature for our context.
Thank you. Thank you.
But yes, like that's a valid question. Like we don't have that kind of testing done from site. It's right time. Like we need to do it.
Sir, myself A.K. Singh, I am superintending engineer in UP PWD. Sir, in UP we are having around 3 lakh kilometer of roads. Out of 3 lakh kilometer, national highway, state highway, MDR, ODR and CT roads, these 5 categories around makes 1 lakh kilometer. And the remaining 2 lakh kilometer, that is around 66% we are having village road. Now, my question is from Dr. Swami. Dr. Swami, you have studied on effect of climatic change on pavement infrastructure, right? Sir, the major things we are facing in the field is the problem of damage of roads due to waterlogging. It is not only in the case of the village roads, but in all categories of roads. In national highway, MDR, ODR, it is mostly in habitational portion. If the road is going through there and there is drainage problem. So if you have you any think of any model to make the life of the road better in these conditions, that is, if there is condition of waterlogging, if there is condition of damages due to flood, drowning, etc. That I want to ask.
If I put it correctly, this issue has two-pronged issues. Like one is with respect to hydraulics part. Like I have side channels, drains, whatever. That's something which would be a say domain of a non-pavement engineer. So I am not an expert with that particular area. So things are there. We need to have proper drains designed for what are the hydraulic radius so on, which we studied. I studied 20-25 years back. I don't remember those issues, but essentially those are the whatever the cross section and then whatever the flow we do expect and then the corresponding slope so on. That's one aspect. Other is from the pavement aspect. Yes, with the underlying layers, the drainage issue needs to be taken care. Water does not stay in. I might have water logging, flooding, whatever. So that needs to be taken care. So that's mostly we do take care through the gradation of the underlying layer material. GSP, WMM, whatever. Of course, there are several studies the gradation what we are using is different than the gradation limits which US uses or other parts of world uses. With that, like say probably like I would say we need to look at those aspects with this permeability issue, like we don't have that many studies with Indian context. There are issues, probably we can address those payment related say drainage issues through reasonable gradation issues. Sort picking the what are the gradation.
That is right. But I think जो भी हमारे डिजाइन क्राइटेरिया हैं, these are for this condition that there should not be water logging, there should be drainage, proper drainage. But the fact is that still there happens water logging and there is problem of drainage in the Avadi portion.
See, so, water is the biggest enemy of our roads.
Right.
So we have to make sure water does not stagnate, whether it is surface drainage, subsurface drainage. And if there are built-up areas or rural road passing through village, what I have generally seen in our area in Haryana and Delhi and all, right, we have concrete blocks. Their damage is less. Bituminous road will deteriorate very fast in wet conditions. Few vehicle passes and there will be a porthole and then there will be bigger porthole. So let's find a site specific. First is make sure water does not stagnate on road or side berms. It should drain out as fast as possible. That is by having efficient drainage, that is surface drainage as well as subsurface drainage. Rest, there are site-specific solutions. If it is low-lying area, high flood area, then embankment and then the drainage layer is there. So it depends on, I mean, there is nothing as per one size fits all. There is no, it is a, drainage is again very site-specific also. Right. But make sure water does not stagnate. If it stagnates, then concrete blocks are found, they last much longer than bituminous in the stretch where there is built-up area and water is bound to come. That's what I can say. Thank you.
Any more questions? May I request now Colonel Banwala, my colleague, to sum up this session? One more question. Please.
Please.
Sir, myself, Dinesh Kanvi from CIY, sir. The question is to Dr. Swami, sir. So just wanted to know that bitumen, for the climate change, how we would be coping up for the future, means these models which have been developed, means what you're developing. So how much time it would take to implement? Means it's a question from my side.
At a very simple level, like we say, predict on the worst case scenario.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So we say, assuming like what is the steady state condition, like what, like we have the average temperature plus add some more value, like which is on the higher side. So usually that should take care of, like say, extreme cases. In this, like we say, as the example was given, like say, I expect 40 degrees Celsius on an average in a average year. Versus like if I am predicting 50 degrees Celsius, say southern part of India, like we said, nowhere like I can expect that 50 degrees Celsius. So now if I am designing the pavement and using the binder for that 50 degrees Celsius, mostly like your pavement is going to work. Yes, like with that, like the, yes, so accordingly, like your pavement design is going to change, like we say, higher the temperature would mean like your modulus values is going to drop down significantly. Okay. With the Indian context, IRC 37, that's the resilient modulus. So that is going to drop down significantly. So which means like I need to alter the gradation or binder content, optimize over there to get a resilient modulus value which is going to work for that particular temperature, right? So which would mean like we are looking at an integrated problem, mixer design, pavement design put together.
So but then it has to be upgraded in the IRC 37, then we have
like with the current IRC IIT PAVE guideline, like there is enough provision, like we say for site specific condition, like if I know the resilient modulus values, I can do that iterative process, come up with reasonable thickness. That can be done.
Okay. But this could be valid for higher temperature, just because what?
Yes. Yes, that's true. Like this is what like we are looking at for high temperature regime. But once we look at the low temperature regime also, that's a different animal by itself. So that's something like we are looking at, like say polymer modification and whatnot, so that like you look at like reasonable modulus values throughout the expected service temperature regime.
Right. Okay, thanks.
Now I request Colonel Banwala to sum up the session, please. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman, sir. First speaker was Mr. Yoshinori, our friend from Japan. I thank him for giving inputs from ground and very valuable guidelines they have prepared, especially in tunnel construction, where there are a lot of challenges. I happen to inspect a quality work of tunnel work going on in Kulu. I mean, health of the workers is a very important aspect which they brought out. And safety, works on safety also, and of course they really work under tremendous stress also because of uncertainties of the tunneling. My only request is, Japan is well known for handling their disasters, especially earthquakes, in very efficient manner. And we look forward for a lot of inputs from you on this field, because earthquake is such a thing. I don't think we and our infrastructure is well prepared, and it's testing time for everybody. So hopefully we'll get some more inputs in coming days about earthquake, management of earthquake, especially after the earthquake is over. Second speaker was our friend from Arunachal, Mr. Dimole. Very valuable. I had 4 tenures in Northeast, so I am well versed with the area, and the climate change effect is for everybody to see. And climate change is now part and parcel of our lives. Sooner we accept and take necessary measures to mitigate adverse effect on our infrastructure and on our lives also, better it is. So we need to make sure that we are prepared in every manner. Dr. Arvind Swami gave inputs, especially vehicle statistics. We are okay per 1,000, but when it comes to total population, I think we will outnumber, and that is the issue. Any policy or any scheme we have, but the volume of our population adds to the issues whenever we want to implement it. Traffic data also in form of MSA, I have reviewed few DPRs in NHI. Traffic data evaluation is also not very accurate, and that is a very important factor when we want to design the pavements. As far as air temperature maps, it's a good beginning, and it will guide highway engineers in choosing right grade of binder as per the project site conditions. I am also very happy to announce that yesterday in IRC Council, one document, Disaster Resilient Green Highways in Multi-Hazard Ecosystem Guidelines for Highway Engineers, have been approved, and which will address a lot of issues, and of course sensitize our highway engineers about design, planning and maintenance and construction of highways. With this, I'll request our chairman to sum up the session.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Mr. Yoshimori, Mr. K.C. Dhimole, and Dr. Swami for their wonderful presentation, which was very informative and thought-provoking. The questions raised by the audience were also, they agitated the minds of the gatherings over here and the speakers. Overall, the seminar was very good. I think the stakeholders are taking away some knowledge from this place, which will be helpful in their future endeavor. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you for all the presentations. Now I would like to thank to Chairman Sir and all the presenters for this session, for throwing light on the importance of climate change and its effect on the mountainous regions, being specific Arunachal Pradesh, and what are the safety measures to be taken while tunneling, and what are the bitumen binder to be used considering the temperature conditions, and to reduce the carbon emissions in order to protect our environment. In this row, now I would request to our respected Chairman Sir and Co-Chairman Sir to come forward on the podium in order to give the mementos to our presenters. Please, sir. First one, Mr. Yoshinori Kawamura, sir. Now, Shri Keshi Dhimole. A big round of applause. Now, Dr. Arvind Swami. Now, I would request our Chief Engineer, Sir, Balen, Sir, to come up on the stage and give mementos to Chairman, Sir, and Co-Chairman, Sir. And these mementos are confirming to the ODOP program of the UP government, that is One District, One Product program. Now I would like to call all the presenters to come forward for the group photo with the Chairman, Sir, Co-Chairman, Sir, and Chief Engineer, Sir. Sir, for group photo. With this technical session ends, and thank you to all the listeners.